When you walk into an elementary school where they're in sort of an immersion program, a dual language program, you're watching young people be excited because they're working with each other a lot. And a lot of times you're seeing students whose primary language is English, maybe working with a student whose primary language is Spanish, or maybe Russian, or maybe it's one of the languages of our native tribes. And they're learning from each other. That's the power. They're both learning a second language while they're also developing their primary language skills, and then they're learning from each other. So it's fun and it's interactive. And when you do it at a young age, they're sponges. They just take this up in a way that none of us could in high school or college.
We want to advocate for dual language programs, whether it's Mandarin, Spanish, Vietnamese, Russian. We just want to make sure that we are going to be educating a generation of children who are ready for the future.
One of the amazing things about dual language is it recognizes the strength of language to develop young people. And we have spent way too long in this country and in this state seeing a second language as deficit. We starved kids of math and science and other things until they learned English first. All of the science has been clearly debunking that for a very long time. If we can keep kids in their native language, Spanish for some, English for many, while they're learning a second language, and give them content like math, social studies, physical education, health class in their native language, they not only come out stronger in their first language, they're acquiring a second language, and they're stronger in those other subject areas. So this is a question of equity. This is a question of how do we lift up all of our students regardless of their primary language. You give them opportunities to learn multiple languages and contextualize other subjects in those multiple languages. This is at the heart and soul of a more equitable society and really recognizing the diversity of our families. 2/3 of this entire hemisphere has Spanish as their first or second language, but we don't isolate our efforts in bilingual to that. We obviously have a huge need on the Pacific Rim to have our students thinking about Mandarin Chinese, thinking about Japanese and Russian and so many other languages. So we have 29 federally recognized tribes in the state of Washington. They have their own powerful historic languages. Sometimes these are really at risk of going away. And tribal elders and tribal leaders have been building back these languages and introducing it to their young people. They are so thirsty for their native languages to survive and thrive, and to not just develop that in their young people, but to make sure that the rest of Washingtonians are aware of these rich languages.
The more that we can teach through a dual language approach, the more that we can embrace bilingualism, the more that we can teach the value of being aware that cultural diversity is wonderful and that we can all learn from our diverse cultures.
En nuestra escuela y en nuestros programas de lenguaje dual, ambos idiomas son importantes y un idioma apoya al otro.
It's imperative that in today's society, people need to know how to relate and work with other people. Those are some of the things that we teach in a school like this.
Dual immersion is really swimming in the language you want to learn from a young age.
In my classroom, because I teach English and math, my language of instruction is English. But then the other half of the day, my students are going to my partner who teaches science and Spanish.
What inspired me to be a bilingual educator is having the experience of learning a second language, coming to a country, not knowing a single word of English. You as a teacher need to understand that they can have success.
Last year, our first group of kids were third graders taking the state test, and they were able to perform only in English because that assessment is only available in English. Even though they'd had most of their instruction in Spanish, kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, they were able to beat the state average on that assessment, taking it in English.
So like any language though, we want everyone aware of these languages. So local communities will choose whether they're going to be English and Spanish, or they're going to really focus on Russian or Vietnamese or a tribal language, a native language. It'll still be very locally determined as we build this out, but there's a richness to this that makes our students more global even as they're making decisions locally.
That flag represents the beauty of this country in its full diversity. All of its colors, all of its languages, all of its ethnicities. It's blending us together to see the richness of our background. the pride of where we come from, both in language and in culture and in race and religion and faith.
That research and also from experience, 9 years in the programs, we know that the students all thrive and achieve academic proficiency, if not more, in our program.
Language is one part of culture, but language is not culture in itself. There are so many other elements that come into play to understand not just the language, but the traditions, the values, the beliefs, and the dreams that we all have for our kids.
Entonces es muy importante que los niños sepan que no nada más es aprender un idioma, sino que los idiomas te abren las puertas para entender culturas, para entender cómo piensan las personas y cómo somos tan conectados que no somos tan diferentes uno a otro.
So here's the vision. Imagine you're living in the first state in the United States of America, where as a parent you are confident that your child is going to go to school to get a very high quality education, and while they're doing that, they become multilingual. They're speaking multiple languages, they relate to cultures around the world, and their concept of their own success is never limited to just their geography. They think of South America, Asia, Africa, Europe, the world as their opportunity. We will be a stronger country culturally. We will be a stronger country economically when our young people are as global in the way they see the world as our counterparts in Europe or Asia. They are learning English to be successful economically, and we should have our students thinking the same way. That's the vision, and I want to be the first state. I want to be the first state where the country says, Washington State made this a priority, and every kid in that state has an opportunity to be multilingual. That is where we're going.